Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight, and to those watching at home remotely. We're pleased to welcome Francis Campani and Michael Schwarting tonight of Campani and Schwarting Architects, along with their associate Heather Korb. They're here tonight to present this workshop and to discuss a climate resiliency plan for this community. Thank you to Trustee Casse for facilitating what I'm sure will be a very informative, constructive, and advantageous event, and to Kevin Wood for bringing this wonderful workshop to everyone's living rooms. As everyone is aware, the village of Port Jefferson, Drowned Meadow if you will, has had unending issues with flooding as a result of topography, tides, runoff, rains, storms, a shallow water table, and many other issues that we will be hearing more about this evening. I believe tonight's workshop will be extremely helpful in moving Port Jefferson towards the ability to implement a responsible and solid resiliency plan for the future. And with that, I will turn the microphone over to Rebecca to explain more about the committee and what they've been working on, and then we will have Campani and Schwarting do their workshop. Thank you all.
Hey, good evening, everyone here and everyone at home. First, I want to wish everyone happy holidays, whatever it is you're celebrating this time of the year. We're really happy that the Project Action Committee was able to put this together to with our tech wizard, Kevin Wood, to have a high fidelity recording as well as a survey that's available online. So this recording will be indefinitely available. So if you're in-house tonight and you want to go back and review something that was said, you'll be able to do that. And if you're at home, whether it's right now at this moment or any time in the future, you'll be able to refer back to this. And then the survey, which you'll see QR codes around the room. We also have a couple of printed copies, and those at home, you'll be able to see the link in the description and the chat of this YouTube video. You'll be able to access and input your opinions into that survey for the next 30 days. So May 6th, 2023, that survey closes. And I cannot stress enough how crucial everyone's voice is in this process. This is a climate resilience plan, and it's for our community, and you are our community. So this is really something that's, this project cannot move forward without the voices of all of our residents. So please log on, take that survey. It should take you about 5 minutes after having watched the presentation. Send it to your friends, your neighbors, talk it up for the next 30 days. You're at the coffee shop, you run into someone, tell them, hey, did you see that plan, the survey and video? Log on. So thank you for your help, and thank you in advance for taking that time to fill out that survey and help guide this process to the next step. Up to this point, the Project Advisory Committee, which is made up of fellow residents, some from the Conservation Advisory Council, our CASA, the town of Brookhaven has a representative there. They have been helping to guide this document that will be our climate resilience plan with a focus on flooding. And so I want to thank them for helping to put together this workshop and for putting together the document thus far. The working document, some of the pages are on display here after the presentation. You feel free to get up and look at those pages of the working document. I want to thank the Department of State. This is funded under a grant from the Department of State. We have over $80,000 to fund this project, which is really wonderful for our community. It's a necessity, but the money is not coming out of Port Jefferson's own budget. And so we're very grateful to the Department of State, grateful to the Board of Trustees, current and past, who helped to attain that grant and continue to help guide this process as well. And want to thank our partners, nonprofits throughout Long Island, New York, and on the other side of the Long Island Sound in Connecticut as well. So we have Sea Grant, we have Elizabeth Hornstein, who's just joined us, who's been really an important part of our process as well. So all that being said, let's get to the meat of the presentation. We have Michael from Campani and Schwarting here, who will guide you through the coming slides. If you're watching at home and cannot see the slides very clearly, we will be posting the video tomorrow with the slideshow cut in so that the slides are very, very visible there. So please be aware that if you'd like to, again, revisit, that will be edited. Again, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Michael, Francis, and Heather, and we'll look forward to the presentation.
Good evening. We're the consultants for the grant, and the grant runs until 2025. So it's a pretty long period of time, and we're just, I shouldn't say tip of the iceberg these days, but we're just beginning the work on the grant, and this phase of the work is basically data collection to begin to define the projects which will be the work of the rest of the grant period. I think we've got, we'll present several different issues tonight, and the first one is the problem, and we know the problem very well. It's been in the newspapers in the past. This is an extreme example of the problem, but we've had flooding that's gone up as far as Arden Street and flooded all the buildings between that and the harbor. So we already know that there's a fairly elaborate problem. More views of one of the, I think this was Sandy. And it's not just downtown near the harbor that we have a problem. We have another area around the fire station, and I think a lot of you know from the news of the different floodings, the kind of disaster to the basement of Theater 3 and the fire station itself, which in many rainstorms gets quite a bit of water. And we know the reason for that. It's sitting right in the middle of what once was called Crystal Lake. So in terms of the history of the problem, we have, as I say, the period of that we've been working now is basically data collection, and we've collected information on these different topics that I'm presenting. The history of the issue comes mostly from looking at old maps. The village has a wonderful archive of visual images and things like this wonderful map. Actually, the images are around the room here on the wall. But one of the things that this 1873 map shows is Crystal Lake, which is there. This is basically Main Street, Barnum, probably modified over time at this point, and East Main comes and loops around at that point, going down to the harbor. There's a few things you can see from this map besides the lake. There's a stream that's coming down into the lake from the south through the watershed area that I'll describe, and continues down to the harbor. And on this map it says that there was shipbuilding here. So they built ships on the south side of West Broadway, and there was a drawbridge that allowed at presumably high tide the ships to be moved in and out from the harbor. So that's a pretty elaborate event that happened in Drowned Meadow, that they in fact were able to build ships inland. There's another barely visible on this map, but a water body that is on the east side of Main Street, basically where the Arden Street parking lot is, or the often called the Gap lot. So probably coming down from Spring Street, water coming in this direction and also collecting in this area that we don't really think of as being so low. But in fact, it at times has collected in extreme rainstorms water. The other thing to note is that the harbor came right up to West Broadway. And until they built the ferry pier, the shipbuilding and much of the work of the harbor happened right at West Broadway. So what we see today in terms of the Brookhaven parking lot is all landfill into the actual harbor itself. This is a map of about 60, 70 years later, and it's not that much different. We can still see Crystal Lake. We can see the water actually going through various streams down to Mill Creek, and here we get Mill Creek that's coming from Brook Street over here across Barnum, which is there, over to this shipbuilding water body, and there's still the connection under West Broadway out to the harbor. The harbor is being built on a little bit more, particularly around the end of Main Street. Another interesting map we didn't put in this, but is in our documents, is that there was a pond even up where the tennis courts are at the high school, which seems like a very high elevation, but and things may have been filled in different ways. But so the maps tell us a good deal about the conditions, and what we know is that it's all still there. So you can see the water back behind West Broadway, basically where the Meadows parking lot is now. And this photograph on the bottom is coming right by the drawbridge of West Broadway, looking to the south, where that shipbuilding water body once existed. The two images on the right are of Crystal Lake. And you can see basically over to Main Street and some of the fabric that still exists today. But the lake was quite large. And this view is from the south. Barnum is coming, splitting down here, and it's a little hard to see, but there's water between Barnum and the harbor, which is this lake. And as I said, it's basically where the fire department is today, the lowest part of that. Aerial photographs are also very useful. They give us a good image of the village as it grew over time. And these correspond pretty much to the last map that I showed you. And what we can see is the Mill Creek coming across from Brook Street and then coming still out to the harbor at this point. It's a little bit hard to see there, but it's a continuous water piece, and there's quite a bit of water right about where the new housing projects have been built. The other thing that's interesting in this photograph is there's a strong line right here. And that was a culvert. We haven't uncovered where, when, and who built it, but we think it's from around the 1940s. It's a 3-foot by 6-foot concrete box underground, and it was exposed on top. We were told by some that, in fact, school kids used to walk on top of it to get to school. And you can see some water basically around where Ruvo's is, and there's still a little bit of the underground water coming up at that point today. The photograph on the right is looking to the east from the west, and we can see Mill Creek very clearly going under Barnum and under West Broadway and out to the harbor. And we can also see this culvert that connects right, you can see the pipe right out behind Village Hall. And it goes all the way back to the intersection of Barnum and Main Street. And it collects water from various sources that I'll describe in a moment. So these are interesting conditions that we've been able to learn from historical records. Okay, existing conditions. Another area of our study, of the various data collections we've had. The first two images are of the village and the watershed. On the left, the red line is the village boundary. And I hope you can see the blue line, which is the watershed. And what that line is the highest point of land that flows down to the harbor. And it follows along the railroad track up here, which you can see. It goes close to Brook Street and so forth on the back. This is West Broadway coming downhill. So that's all watershed till you get to the top of West Broadway. This is the Upper Port train station, and the watershed line goes basically across Belterre Road. On the east side of Belterre Road, it begins to pitch to the east, although the village continues in that direction. So there it departs from the village boundary. But this map on the right is a topographic map, and it gives a real strong visual sense of the watershed conditions. This blue line runs basically, and it's on this map too, and you can see the very steep slopes that come right off of the kind of high sort of plateau area that slopes down to the center of the village. So we have the steep street of East Main and East Broadway, and West Broadway coming to the center. But this big sort of half bowl shape is where water flowed into the marshland originally, and it's still flowing there in its own, seeking its own paths. Two more maps we've made. The one on the left, which again has the watershed line, the town line actually, is the kind of built-out fabric of Port Jefferson. You can see the commercial area has the bigger roofs, and that's the downtown area, but also all the residential surrounding areas, which each have their own connection to the road infrastructure system. And we can also see the kind of density of the older housing on the east side of East Main Street, where the streets are closer together and the lots are smaller, expanding out to more kind of later built out areas. But there's clearly you can see the amount of building in this watershed area. On the right is open space that's owned publicly, and some of it's green and some of it's gray. The green is mostly green. The gray is asphalt. So there's a large portion of area that the village or public works can provide stormwater mitigation without moving into private property areas. So that's an important map, and we can see that there's a lot of gray, but we do also have some green to work with. These two maps we call permeability maps, and it sort of follows from what I just presented, that the black are the buildings, the gray are the streets and parking lots. And we can see when we get downtown, there's almost no green left. It's all gray or black, and it moves out to be more green than black as we get to the top of the watershed. But this is a kind of enlargement of the downtown area, and 45% of this area is either streets or asphalt parking lots. The bulk of the rest are rooftops of buildings because you can see there's very little green down here, permeable surfaces. So this highlights a problem of stormwater runoff. Two other maps that we've made. One we called Steep Streets, and it's pretty obvious for all of us who know the village well that basically on the east side of Main Street, every street is a pretty steep angle, and talk about some of the conditions there. But all of that is contributing to the stormwater runoff that goes ultimately to downtown and most unfortunately, probably into the harbor without being very cleaned. It's ground surface runoff. So the steep streets are an important fact to reckon with, and we can see that it's not only the lowland of the commercial area of downtown. The contributing factors are related to the whole watershed topographical condition. The map on the right is pipes and culverts, and it doesn't have outflows, but the basic system of draining stormwater in the village is through storm sewers that are built on the streets, and Route 25A has a fairly well-developed system of stormwater drainage, and that's this blue line, which is all piped together and ends up at Mill Creek. And there's other pipes that connect the stormwater drainage on some of the steep streets and other places that are also piped into the 25A main line, which means that a lot of the water is not contained on its site. It's being moved actually down towards the harbor and to the downtown. So that's another important piece of information that is from the way the infrastructure was built over time. Okay, the next thing that we've been doing with data collection is climate change conditions, past ones, present conditions, and predictions. And there are a lot of sources from national sources, NOAA and FEMA, that you probably heard about frequently being spoken of as entities that are concerned with the changes in climate and have been working for the last couple of decades on collecting information for us to be able to understand our conditions. This is a USGS map, and we put this here just to say there's three big problems in the village. One is the harbor and the rising tides and storm surges from the harbor. The other is the lowland of downtown, which has water right under the surface. And the third one is the kind of half bowl shape of the topography, the watershed area. These three things interact with one another to cause the problems that we've been having in the past and are still having and will have in a worse way according to predictions. So this is an interactive map, which we hope is going to work. But basically, the red area is areas that are 11 feet, where the water is 11 feet or less below the surface, the ground surface. And when you interact with that, you can point out spots, and it tells you exactly where it is. So at the harbor front, it's 8 feet below. At Main Street intersection, it's 6 feet. Interestingly, it's closer than when we move back. So this is a very helpful map to understand these conditions. 4 feet in the Arden lot, down to 3 feet. We're thinking we should offer swimming lessons. And then fire station, 2 feet. So we've gone pretty far inland, and we've got this condition. So this is a very helpful map. And what you can see, the 11-foot area extends all the way over to Brook. It goes to East Main Street, and it goes all the way back to the intersection of Barnum and Main Street. And that's 11 feet or less, and then it grades out. But so this gives us a very good information on what's below us. Okay, what's coming from above us? Rainfall. And there's a lot of information from different sources on rainfall, but all the predictions suggest, and this kind of gives you a sense, I'm not going to describe this, but it's tracking annual rainfall, intense moments and periods when it's more dry. But the prediction is that the storms are going to increase. So what we've experienced over the years is going to change for the worse, in the sense of more water coming into the watershed area. And so we got the water below, we got the water coming from, then we got the water coming in from the harbor. The sea level rise and storm surges that are related to that. And there's a lot of predictions and a lot of study that's happening with that. And just this chart on the left suggests that in the next decade, we're going to get from 2 to 10 inches, but 2100, we're going to go from 15 inches to 6 feet. So our grandchildren's children are going to be potentially have 6 feet. And this is another interactive chart that tracks rainfall. There's 3 different categories, a 10-year possibility, 50-year, and 100-year. And I think this is the 10-year, the 50-year. This is the middle one. And you can see it's growing. When we get to 6 feet, that's where the water will be. And we'll have little aspects of Venice to play with. The village hall is underwater, by the way. Maybe it doesn't come up to the rise, but it's right in the middle of that. And then there's one map. This is from New York State, which puts a lot of factors together to talk about risk. And you can see on the list, it's sort of the ones that I've been talking about or we've mapped and we need to utilize to see. But the high-risk area is basically up to Arden Street in the downtown Port Jefferson. And the moderate risk goes all the way back to Barnum. So these are all sort of reinforcing each other, telling us the same story from different points of view, that we're getting hit from the harbor, from our low water, and from the rain. So there are ways to deal with this. And as I mentioned, kind of storm drainage systems that are have been with us for some time, and that's the most common method of taking up the water in the storm drains and letting it permeate into the ground, hopefully. And they need to be cleaned and maintained if they're going to work. But there's natural solutions. In the last couple of decades, there's been a lot of study and projections of possible ways to collect water, not through sort of technological systems, but through natural systems, which can enhance the visual quality of the neighborhood. So they're not only, they're working and they're creating a kind of possible image of the village, enhancing the quality of life. So there's rain gardens. There's one of those out near here. There's a couple that have been built in the village already, and there's a whole technology of those. There's bioswales, which are similar, more extensive than the rain garden. There's bioretention planters. That's kind of interconnected elements. There's ways of getting water to trees so that the water is being used in different ways. And there's even ways to address our parking lots in the spaces at the ends of cars where there's always the kind of white striping and stuff to say you're not supposed to go there, that could actually be places where water is collected. There's daylighting of creeks, which I'll come back to in a moment, which are ways to clean the water instead of putting it all in the ground. You can use these devices to enhance the flow of water as it goes to the harbor. And there's permeable pavement systems, which there's been a fair amount of investigation of and attempts to find ways to use those and still be able to plow snow and so forth. So there's an array of devices that we've collected, and they're all well known. So past plans and possible projections. There's another area, and a lot of these come from the request of New York State in the grant that we collect this before we start identifying projects. So in 2014, we did a project, another grant from New York State for the harbor front revitalization, and proposed to take the 305 cars off of the Brookhaven lot and move them around to various places to create a passive recreational park. The idea was to make the whole waterfront pedestrian rather than automobile, and to connect from Centennial Park all the way across to Barnum, if possible, which means solving what happens to those cars. And at that, in that plan, it proposed to do parking structures. A key part of that plan on the right was to daylight Mill Creek. This was recommended in the Mill Creek plan, which I'll talk about in a moment. There's a big culvert that you can see the end of on the south side of West Broadway, and you can actually see it trying to get out or in down at the harbor where there's a badly functioning control device. But the idea would be to, in a potential park, to demonstrate the idea of collecting the water and cleaning it and moving it to the harbor in a better way. So the plan on the bottom was a plan that was approved in the comprehensive plan. It's in the appendix of the comprehensive plan. And it was done in conjunction with the town of Brookhaven because it's their property that we were mostly dealing with. So nothing as much has happened to that, but the grant offers a possibility to think about this in a new way that to work for our stormwater issues. This is the village as we see it today, and this is the kind of the project that was proposed to project green open space into what might become what we call a sponge, to capture the water before it moves into upland areas. The other very good document is the Mill Creek Watershed Mitigation Report, I think it's called, which was done in 2010. So 13 years ago, we had a very comprehensive study with many recommendations of working with Mill Creek to allow it to flow and work as a water collection, but also in relationship to the habitat that was it sort of encouraged, and the development of a more scenic condition, basically, along the Mill Creek. So this Chick, did you do this plan? I think so. This was built after the Mill Creek plan, the Mill Creek, excuse me, interpretive walkway, and it goes, as hopefully you all know, from basically West Broadway, past Port Jefferson Brewery, past the tennis courts, back of Village Hall where the culvert is coming in, over to Barnum. A very nice walk, and in fact it's being refurbished for the first time since that work was done. And we have to thank Bob Laravi for working as the Mill Creek steward to remove some of the invasive species. But this plan proposed a number of projects to help the stormwater conditions in the village, not only for Mill Creek, but the things that bring water to Mill Creek. In fact, they identified all of the stormwater catch basins all the way up to the train station, numbered them, examined them, and reported on them. So this report, unfortunately, has not been looked at enough, and needs to be revived and rebuilt into this project. On the right is a drawing of proposed extension of that and this is Barnum and West Broadway, to continue it along the creek all the way over to Brook Street, where there's a pond. And Bob has cleared away. It's a beautiful pond. Nobody could even see it for years. And it's now, you should go by there. It's a quite beautiful kind of mini Walden Pond that's where the water from the west part of the watershed is coming down, and it's easy to identify a lot of the sources. Coming into the pond, it was called the Old Mill Creek Pond, Old Mill Pond. And Old Mill Creek went to the harbor. How am I doing? I'm supposed to finish. Okay. This is a little folio that was made by the Historical Society with the help of Stony Brook faculty members. And again, this should be reprinted and available. A lot of it has been used in the interpretive walkway on the signage, but it demonstrates that it's possible to do water collection, solve water problems, and enhance the scenic character of the village at the same time. The two could go together. And this little report is a quite wonderful demonstration of that possibility. So we made a little diagram of that possibility, that if we could daylight the creek at the harbor and add to the interpretive walkway to the west, we could end up at the pond and have this wonderful linear resource that goes right next to the village, or in the village, but is as kind of natural, brings nature into the village. The next. Yeah. So we we made a map of taking all these natural systems and identifying places that they could go in the downtown area. The parking lots could be developed to collect water, and so forth. So this, no one can see this map, I'm sure, but you can see at least that there's quite a density of possible projects that happen, and this list, which are the ones I went through earlier, could all be used to create, even as small elements, a kind of bigger resource of collecting water. So this is sort of Google Earth views, kind of zeroing in on where those could be. This is the trailer, Brookhaven Trailer Park, over next at the end of Barnum, right at this point. And so it's actually going to be refurbished in the next year. And so we're hoping that because there are two catch basins in that asphalt. So there's potentially a way to keep the water from going into the harbor. The next two are basically the Brookhaven parking lot, and there's places where water can be collected. This is where the culvert could be daylighted. And over to the right is Bales Park, a little park that was built next to the Fifth Season Restaurant and the Baker's Alley parking lot, where things could happen. And these all are identified and keyed into that map that wasn't very visible that I showed you. On the left is around Rocket Ship Park. There's several areas of greenery that could be enhanced as public space, green space, but also work to collect the water. And a key one is that culvert that I showed very early on. Photograph aerial view comes right alongside the fire station. You can actually see a bit of it at that point, and goes right down through to Village Hall, and goes into the right at this point where you can go and look at it. This is an enlargement of what the study could start to do, to take these different places and utilizing the data collection. How deep is the water? How much water might come? What could be the effects of the rising tide? To examine and make places that are contributions to the scenic quality of the village, but work to help us with the water problem. So this is that space, the way it is today, and this is what it could be. It's nicer, and it will do something. We could collect. There's a lot of the recent large storms have collected a lot of water. Some of it's gone all the way up East Broadway, almost up to the village center. So it's an area that needs to be thought about and developed. This is the area to the south of the basketball courts and Rocket Ship Park. The culvert is going right through here. This is potentially what it could be. It could be daylighted into a stream. And there's lots of examples of where that's being done in many towns in the U.S. So it's not a big invention. It's a workable device. I think that's the end. So we've been working on those areas, and we're at the point where we want the community to say what you think, and we want to begin to define projects, and we're going to have another meeting with you once we get into those projects to get feedback before they're completed, and we will start to move towards solving the problem now that we have spent quite a bit of time understanding the problem. Thank you.
Don't get too comfortable. Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael, and your associates for that incredible presentation. It's a little overwhelming. Yeah? You get a lot of nodding here, hopefully at home too. But this is why we're looking at it. The only thing worse than digging into this problem is to ignore it, because it's happening, whether or not we do something. And so as a community, again, we really need to come together to prioritize, make these decisions, support this work so that it is guided towards the results that you wish to see as a community. So we did create this survey. If you have a phone, a smartphone, you can scan the QR code. I'm sure there's someone near you who will help you with that if you're having trouble. We have a couple of paper copies, but as someone who's done a lot of data entry in my life, I implore you to please use the QR code or a link online. I'll come around and help if needs be. And so there's questions on there to help with prioritization. There's questions on there to help guide us for your green infrastructure, which is a lot of sort of the bioswales and rain gardens you saw, versus gray infrastructure, which is sort of retaining walls and catch basins, things like this. And then there's also a area there for comments and further questions. So for the rest of this time, so we have 45 minutes to take questions and comments in the room here. We're going to limit comments just to 2 minutes in interest of everyone being able to come up and make comments or ask questions that they wish to. We will ask you to come up to this microphone here so that everyone indefinitely can hear your question and hear the answer here by Casa. And we'll start that time now. So again, thank you, to our presenters. Thank you. I forgot to thank TBR for a great article about this. Who read the TBR article and that brought them out today? Excellent. So a good portion of the folks here. So thank you for highlighting this really important community effort. So go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question or comment. Not all at once. Go ahead. Please come up to the mic. Oh, we do need to because we're recording. If we could just.
Well, I have a question about, you're talking about the runoff. Have you looked, you talked about points that you identified around the village, up on the hills, and I know where there's several that when it rains, it comes down hard. And you can also see how it comes down Main Street. Like sometimes it's 7 and 8 feet wide from the curb. So I'm thinking about my question is, has the state looked at diverting the water as it comes down into our village?
Yeah, thank you. One thing with it, we haven't yet mapped, although with the help of the identification of all the catch basins, and I didn't mention this, but it's come up in our meetings with the PAC committee, that what about stopping the rain before it gets downtown on these steep streets? And one thing that we discovered is the catch basins are can. They're really some streets have none. Some of the steepest streets have none, and all of them have too few. So the catch basin system itself is not very rational, and it should be looked at. And I think that's an important issue. Can we catch the water before it gets downtown? What we would like to investigate is there a natural way, rather than doubling the number of catch basins, is there a way that we can naturally collect the water on the steep streets and maybe enhance the character of the streets as well? But they're narrow streets. People use them for parking their cars and so forth. So, but that's an area that we plan to look at pretty carefully to see if we can solve some problems before they become a bigger problem. Also, in the village code has changed over time to say that every private property has to keep stormwater on their property. And that's an important issue. And it's gone up from, I think, a 3-inch rain to an 8-inch rain that you're supposed to be. But that only it takes effect for new construction, and we can't. The village can't ask people to do things. But there are a lot of driveways on that map where water could be coming from the driveways. But what we can do, what we can research and suggest, is in the roadways themselves of the steep streets, try to solve the problem.
So thank you, Michael, for the explanation and for that question. That is something that we are looking at by the guidance of the community. If this seems to be a priority, as our first question points out that it is, the steep streets, again, they are narrow. They are these historic streets, but I went to a webinar, attended a webinar, and there was a great presentation by the city of New Haven where they talked about putting bioswales in around their streets and ended up collecting over 75% of the stormwater in place, as opposed to having it run, and we've all seen the rivers of Port Jefferson when it rains, having it run, and even if it's collected by a stormwater basin, going into that main pipe and then just flooding right into town. So, this is something that we're planning on subcontracting or have subcontracted Hirani engineers, and if this is something that's chosen as a community priority, they will be looking into how this might take effect in Port Jefferson with our unique conditions here. So thank you for that question. Who's got Ray?
Good evening, and thank you. Michael, that was a great presentation. I'm Ray DeBias. I'm chair of the Village Planning Board. I was also involved with the development of the comprehensive plan, which was a while ago now. But thank you for that, Michael. I have some information which I'm going to leave with you, and I'll be able to maybe supplement this with some other information. But you mentioned the flood predictions for the next 30, 40 years. I don't know if you're aware, there's an interagency sea level rise scenario tool that's available online. It's a cooperative effort between NASA, NOAA, and the USGS, Geological Survey. It's an online thing that anybody can use. It was a little cumbersome. I used it out in Riverhead, and I was surprised because I was looking at flooding along the Peconic River to see what the predictions were for the next 30 years, and it wasn't as severe as I thought along the shoreline of the Peconic. But I did not look at Port Jefferson, but that's something that, you know, should be done. I should also disclose that I'm also a professional engineer, and in my day job I work for a consulting engineer. So I have some information on, because we do drainage and traffic and other things. But the thing that was stunning to me, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the situation in Port Jefferson is almost a mini bowl. It's a bowl, and it's a mini bowl compared to the situation in Huntington. And I'm talking about a state road, in this case Route 110, between 25A and Huntington Harbor. Same type of situation where there's tidal flooding that floods up from the shoreline, and there was an immense amount of water coming downhill to the point where we have photographs of people being rescued in boats on the road because the flooding was so severe. My firm, and I'll just mention that we participated with another firm in this study, and I'm going to give you a summary of it. I can also direct you to it. The study was funded by DOT, and the recommendations were implemented about 10 years ago. Some of the recommendations, most of them were implemented, and now there's a final design phase to implement the rest of them. But similar situation, some of the recommendations they developed were tidal gates. There was a malfunctioning tidal gate on the shoreline that was not working properly, so that was upgraded. They implemented a technique where taking some of the roadway flooding and transferring it to a parallel creek, and you were talking about possibly daylighting the creek or the underground drainage system that runs on the, I guess on the shore of the village parking lot. They also, I mentioned daylighted a portion of the stream. They constructed a vegetated filter, which includes articulated concrete mats and native wetland plantings to capture floatables. So that's debris that's in the drainage system. So I'm going to give you this information. It's a summary, but also I'll direct you to the study. And I think in this case, since DOT has already participated in a study, that a funding source possibly could be DOT. State road is involved, and there's significant flooding. Conditions are almost identical to what's happening here, only on a larger scale in this particular study. When we're also talking about funding, are we? Oh, I'm gonna actually, I'll give it to you afterwards, and then I can direct you to some more information. I can forward you more information if you need that, or I can at least tell you where to find it. The other thing was I I don't know if people noticed, but the Sunrise Wind Farm just got, came to an agreement with the town of Brookhaven and Suffolk County. This is just within the last 10 days, I think. They provide community impact funds. So the bulk of the funding is going to Brookhaven and Suffolk County because the cable is coming into Smith Point Park, running up William Floyd Parkway, and it runs along town roads after that, primarily, to Holbrook, where it ties into the electrical grid. I think the village should be, if you haven't already, contacted the town for a piece of that funding, because there will be an impact in the village, because there will be traffic generated by the dock that's going to be used to maintain the wind farm. So there will be a ship taking off from the harbor, Port Jeff Harbor, which I realize is under control of the town of Brookhaven, but still, I mean, there's an impact in the village in terms of this ship, people providing materials, delivering to the ship, workers coming to the ship. A ship, I think, leaves biweekly to go out and maintain the wind farm turbines. So there will be an impact, so that probably should be pursued. I think that was primarily it. So I'll leave some of this with you afterwards, and then I'll direct you to where maybe you can find some more information as well.
Thank you so much, Ray.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for your service on the planning board. Did you want to respond, Michael?
Yeah, just thanks, Ray, for that. We've been looking. I've seen some images of your Huntington work, and I think Heather's looked at that other resource that you mentioned, the sea level rise.
Okay. Good.
But yeah, there's a lot of different places that we get information. But one other thing that we've been collecting is what's happening in other towns. And we're looking at the stormwater departments in Suffolk County, Brookhaven. They're all working on the same issues. So one valuable thing is to kind of share information. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Just one more comment. Since that study was done in Huntington, there's now been advances in drainage software modeling so that you can actually put in a high tide scenario, and over time, a heavy storm, and the water coming in both directions, and how much flooding there is. It's relatively quick now with this new software. It's not like a hand exercise that used to take a lot of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Brookhaven-owned parking lot was discussed, and, options that had been, a plan that had been started, but for some reason didn't come to fruition, and now there is talk of redoing it. So what interventions can we as a village, what's the status of the current planning so that we could make some kind of recommendation, since it's not actually our jurisdiction? And then also, can you speak to just the differences between the kind of hard, and I'm sure at the end of the day it'll be a mix of the kind of hard gray and black kind of mediations, and the green mediations that have to do with daylighting the creek and plantings, so that residents could consider rain gardens or rain barrels or different interventions that might not be very costly. Thank you.
So that's a great question too. As regarding the Brookhaven parking lot, Kevin and myself met with Council Member Kornreich, as well as the Commissioner of Parks for the town of Brookhaven, to discuss the current state and future of that harborfront parking lot there, owned by town of Brookhaven. The parking lot from the boat ramp, sort of the Harbor Commissioner's office, the boat ramp, and west, so where often the boat trailers are and you see the boats coming in and out. That area, I believe, and I know we have Councilmember Cormack's aid here. I believe that is being done either this spring or this fall. Yes? Perfect, thank you. I know that's what they were aiming for. Just a sort of repaving, relining of, redesign of the parking lot so that it will accommodate a greater number of vehicles. They will have some medians which are planted, and so we were glad to see that. So that's happening short term on the west side of the parking lot. Regarding the east side, we, after confirming what's already planned for the west side, we said, as these two municipalities who are looking at, a shared resource in a lot of ways, can we work together over the coming 5 to 7 years, which is their timeline for any renovation of the east side parking lot? I said, can we collaborate on what's going to happen there so that we can be sure that, Brookhaven and Port Jefferson are both pleased with, the plans and have worked together and gone out for grants and whatever might help to facilitate the best results. So they were very, very receptive to that conversation, and we're really excited to move forward working with them in this way because if whatever one municipality can accomplish, two together can accomplish even more. So we're looking forward to working towards hopefully something that, like you saw tonight, and we'll definitely keep the public apprised of how those conversations are going. But that is the timeline, probably 5 to 7 years before anything happens there, which in the government timeline scope is enough time, which is great. So, did you want to add anything, Michael?
Just a little bit of relationship to your question. I think one of the crucial maps we made was the permeability one, and 45% of downtown is impermeable. So that's and way back in 2010, one of the important recommendations of the Mill Creek plan was to reduce the amount of asphalt. How do you do that? We need to study it, but you can imagine it's not easy. You can change the surface to permeable materials, but even that's pretty expensive, and the construction of doing that and having those areas down is problematic. So it's a complicated problem, but it's one that we have to try to work with to find a way to reduce it. The biggest one is if we can change the parking in the Brookhaven area, and that's definitely one of the big issues, political issues, that needs to happen, the relationship between Port Jefferson and Brookhaven to maybe not give the cars the best view of the harbor.
I would just add, thanks. I would just add, but I think that's a great suggestion you have, that as part of the the package of solutions to make a package for residents and what projects could be done on a smaller scale, but smaller adding up to bigger. So great.
Yeah.
We worked together for decades. Hi, I'm Holly Fizeme, and I want to speak a little bit on behalf of the New Civic Association. We would be very glad to be working with residents on any ecological projects that they might apply to their yards and so on. I want to also work on lawns and trees in general, but definitely catching rain, using rain, helping it not to flood the village would be great. Also, I wanted to know, is there a plan for a structure? The evil word parking garage what you're saying sounds wonderful, but I'd like to know, is there another bad side in which we have a 5-story parking garage or something? Is there a plan for that?
We don't have plans for anything yet, but it was part of the plan in the comprehensive plan of the harborfront revitalization, because, as I mentioned, there's 305, I think, cars. in the Brookhaven lot. And so we had proposed a kind of shell game of sorts. One was that we were able to get 135 cars, I think it is, in the trailer park because it's so badly organized for trailer parking that it's possible to make that kind of more of a mixed-use area. And so that takes up a third. Another solution that was part of the comprehensive plan studies was to find places where parking could be in private places that could be used by the village at certain times. For instance, Bosse's has 100 spaces on High Street. There's also been discussion about utilizing the train station parking better. I mean, there's been an attempt to run a jitney that has gone, and even the shelters aren't there anymore. But there's a lot of parking up there that doesn't get used at all in the weekend, and the village has the parking problem on the weekend. So a parking structure is certainly something that we had looked at pretty carefully 15 years ago, or 10 years ago at least. But there's what we need to do first is look at all the possible ways to deal with it and bring those to the table again to the village to get feedback from which ones seem to work. And some of it would be negotiation. I know the village negotiated with Tony Gito to use the parking at CVS at certain times. So there's a bit of looking at possible solutions and then talking them through and seeing if they're really viable before we say this is a possibility. But that's our next phase of work.
I have a quick question. Come on up. Thank you.
Just wanted to add to the parking conversation. I've been working with the parking committee with Kevin Wood, and we're always looking for solutions to increase our parking with the least amount of impact to the village and the community and the residents. One of the things Michael mentioned was the partnership with the CVS lot. In fact, we were up there just yesterday with Rob Gito and trying to optimize the spaces up there. We're always looking at shared parking. We have ongoing conversations with a couple of the business owners in the community to share their parking that they usually will put a chain across on the weekends and the higher times, and hoping we can work on an agreement to add those spaces. They may be small, but they add up over the geography of the village. And additionally, you've probably heard about the ride-share service that we are starting called Passport, which should be up and running hopefully by the end of this month, early next month, or sooner, which is hoping to bring residents into the village, leave their cars at home, which opens up more spaces for others. So it does add to our parking inventory. Okay. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Al Casari. I used to keep a boat at Ralph's Fishing Station, and I always wondered why there was gravel in the parking lot rather than hard pavement. And they said they weren't permitted to put hard pavement there because of drainage, and they wanted rainwater to be absorbed into the land. Why aren't we thinking about gravel in the Brookhaven parking lot rather than repaving it with hard pavement? It's the place where we have the biggest problem, and we're not taking care of the drainage.
Exactly what we had this meeting for tonight, to get suggestions. Yeah, I think the only issue that keeps being brought up about gravel is you can't plow the snow very well. So it has to be done sort of judiciously. But interestingly, the Brookhaven parking lot has no cars in it when it's snowing. Anyway, I mean, there's maybe a good relationship between where you need to plow the snow and where you can put the gravel.
And I think you could put cement markers for parking spots so that you wouldn't have a problem with painting gravel. and I think we could come up with a design that would create much more drainage than we currently
I think you're right. We'll put it on the list.
Hi, Andrew Thomas. I just wanted to thank Michael. This is a terrific presentation. I'm really pleased to see in particular the daylighting stuff. I really love to see that, and he's absolutely right. I just wanted to point out for a helpful suggestion for anyone who's curious what that looks like. There's the Sawmill River has been daylit and is a short drive away just north of the city. You can go check out. It was a much larger stretch that had been urbanized, had been closed in, become parking lots. And what happens is when you close something in like that, it fills up with water. And probably a lot of you have seen when on these heavy rain events, there's not water going into the storm drains. It's coming out of the storm drains, like it's being fed down because it has nowhere to go. So obviously they're doing all of the actual hard work rather than just being intuitive about it. But it seems intuitive to me that if you daylight that culvert, you're giving somewhere for the water at Crystal Brook Lake to go, and you're getting what they did with it in Sawmill River. Is to kind of create this beautiful park where you're down kind of in the bowl, and there's all of these plants that can tolerate periodic flooding. There's been, infrastructure like hard benches and things that can tolerate periodic flooding. So it's this beautiful usable space with a water feature that's like an amenity for the park, but then you have so much more room for water to go without spilling out into businesses and parking lots. And so if you want to see it for yourself, that's not so far away. Thank you.
Yeah, we've actually put a few pictures into our report of that. Online you can find nice pictures of the sawmill daylighting.
Hi, I have just a quick question. Have you considered underground parking for part of the parking? And the other wasn't, I was wondering whether you're extending the land out into the harbor. It wasn't clear to me from your pictures whether that was going to happen.
If we're extending the land into the harbor?
In the port, yeah, no, okay, that's good. But have you considered the bit of underground parking was the question.
Yeah, that's been around. If the water is 4 feet below ground, the underground parking would be very expensive. It can be done that you can build what's called a bathtub, which is a double wall of concrete, and you can go into the water. The problem is if the water rises as predicted over time, it's going to be a real bathtub. I mean, it's just going to fill up with water. So to put underground parking where the flooding is most likely to happen is probably a terrible idea. But yeah. But just also to say, there's no plans to fill in the harbor at all.
Thank you very much for that. It's very informative, what you've been putting together. And you mentioned that it might take 3 to 7 years before anything comprehensive actually gets going. Is that a reasonable amount of time? Or, I mean, from my point of view, it's like a lot of time. It's a long time, right? And in the meantime, is it possible, and this might be more of a question for the trustees than anyone else, is it possible to have some kind of like moratorium or temporary moratorium on more hard surfaces? Is that something that could be addressed or considered, because it's getting worse, right? And sometimes it happens so quickly, like nobody asks us, but suddenly there are these berms that go up. Why? Because they're made of asphalt, and the first rainfall, and they collapse. So we're out there scraping all this asphalt from in front of our houses just to throw it into the trash so that it doesn't keep, I mean, that's what I try and do, because otherwise it just flows down East Broadway into the sewers, which are already full of silt and more asphalt.
So it's a wonderful question and comment to bring up. And again, this is part of the process of getting public opinion. I want to recognize that the entire Board of Trustees, save the mayor, who had a family obligation tonight, but is viewing from home. Hey, Mayor Grant. The entire board is here. And that is really a show of the commitment of the Board of Trustees as a whole to this information. Now that we are all on the same page, having viewed this information, these discussions can be furthered as far as what is it in the next 2 months that we want to do as a board? Was it in the next 6 months, 1 year? And so when we get to that sort of 3+ year point where this long planning process has come to term, because we don't want to be throwing $500,000 at this and large sums of money on things that we don't know are puzzle pieces that will fit together for good problem solving. You're absolutely correct. There are more short-term things that have been being done and will continue to increase in their effectiveness in the short term. But those are conversations that we now all have a shared base to look at. I'll invite the rest of the board to come up.
Sure, that's definitely, thank you for that, and that's a great discussion to start with. But additionally, whether or not a moratorium would work, I'm always in favor of incentives to residents for doing that the village might suggest. Some of Michael's ideas, whether it be the bioswales or things you can do around your own home, whatever that list may be, and maybe some type of incentive. I don't know what that would be, but take that direction as well, in addition to or alternatively.
Thank you. Do any other board members want to?
I just have a question for Ray DeBias. I always call you DeBiase. I'm sorry, DeBias. What you discussed was so interesting to me, and what's going on in Huntington. I wonder if you can come back up here and just talk about how long that project took, how effective it is, and if you have any of those details. But it's so interested in looking into that as a best practice.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, the Huntington study began a long time ago. It was probably 2006, so that was 17 years ago. The study took a while. Well, DOT has a long process. It's, you do a feasibility study, and then you do preliminary design, you have public hearing, you get public input, you address the public comments, you change, you make modifications to what you developed, and then you develop the final design plans. So it takes time to do that, but they got a construction, so the study started in 2006, I think, and then the project was actually completed, the major part of the project. I'm not sure why there was an additional connection to the creek, I think, that was not done originally. I'm not sure if it was funding on the state's end. They didn't have enough money to do the whole thing. They did most of it, and now the rest of the project is under final design. I think it just went out to bid, so it'll be finished. But it takes time, and particularly, DOT has a process. Particularly if there's federal money involved, they're using that. That takes longer, although they act as the agent for the feds.
Is there evidence of mitigation in between the processes that's going on, or has nothing actually started yet?
Well, they completed most of the work, so it's done. I don't know the situation, if the floods have been as bad. I don't think so, because I haven't seen, I think they had the Weather Channel out there one time, showing, live showing the flooding, which is not good. And I haven't read anything about it, so I think it solved most of the problem, but this was the whole caboodle, the rest of it that's under final design now, and it's out to bid. I don't know if the bids came in good or what's going on with that, but we're getting close. Thank you. Okay.
Other questions, comments? Kevin, do you have anything on YouTube?
Good. Nothing on YouTube, if I may.
Please.
Kevin Wood, the village parking administrator, and Michael, really great job. There's such a correlation between parking and what we've seen. Does everybody remember 3 or 4 years ago when the water came rushing down the hill And there is literally video of this 4 to 6 feet into the Gito new residence, Ruvo 4 to 5 feet. And my question is, with everything, if you had your dream scenario and everything that you showed us, if it was all done, would it mitigate that type of capacity? I know it's a little bit of a loaded question, but I'd also like to make a comment about, I always like to point out when the village does something right. And when we built this Barnum parking lot, a lot of people don't realize there are 75 galleys under there, under the parking lot. So you see a lot that looks nice, but underneath there are these huge galleys that collect water. And so, you know, we did it right, and I think that's really worked. Now, looking 4 years later, I've never seen an inch of water in that parking lot. And the bioswales, absolutely. So, if it's possible to answer that question.
Well, I can't really answer that question. I think we have to study worst case scenarios as one end of the things, and also projects that are cost-wise doable. There's so many different parameters, but I think, as Rebecca said, we don't want to make solutions that aren't going to work. So the period of work that we have to do now is to look at projects and see if they add up, if they're going to do the job. But I don't know if it's possible to solve the worst case scenario. As we did the data collection and trying to think about what happens if it comes up to 6 feet, and during Sandy in New Jersey, it came up 14. The tide went 14 feet up. Is that right? So, you know, can we solve a 14-foot tide surge? Yeah.
There's been talk in the past about using the utilization of tiger dams in the midst of a storm, and how that would divert the water back where it needs to go. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the mayor asked us several years ago about tiger dams, so we did some looking into it, and they're complicated. Where to store them, the amount of time it takes to put them in place before a storm. You need a lead time and a lot of people to set them up. So there's a lot of issues about them, but certainly in places that need protection, because you could put them around Theater 3, for instance, or the fire station possibly. And so you could solve local problems. To really divert the water in a big way would be, I think, even just trying to figure out where you put them when they're not being used is complicated. But in our assessment, a lot of our work, because it's in the public realm, basically, and the saving private property certainly should be looked at, and I think the idea about a kind of manual about what are available sources, so that people who every time it rains get hit by something, that there's someplace they can go to find possible ways to solve it, would be a valuable part of what we're doing. Sure.
And I neglected to say how interesting this presentation was, so thank you for Rebecca, for pulling this together. Amazing. The principle behind tidal gates. I know that was a discussion after Sandy in the city. The governor put together a task force of scientists, climate scientists, marine and atmospheric scientists. Some of the Stony Brook scientists were involved in that work. And tidal gates was sort of an organizing principle for part of that work. And I don't know if I don't think they've implemented that in the city, but could you just talk about the principle behind that, and if it even has any implication here?
Well, I should ask Bob Laravi, who's been down there looking at the floodgate at the end of Mill Creek. And in fact, I sent around, there was an article in the New York Times of a much more advanced and probably workable solution. That tidal gate was completely replaced when they put in the new bulkhead, I don't know, 12 years ago or so, when they built the walkway. And it's failed. So whatever was there before went away. They replaced it with this one, which looks very peculiar. And one of the things that we looked into when we did the piece for the comprehensive plan was, instead of a machine to do that, whether or not, if you daylight the creek, you couldn't do a weir, a dam. You know, we could bring in some beavers. Build a way to keep the water in the creek when we want it there. But one issue is that the creek doesn't look very nice at low tide, you know, when there's hardly any water in it. So there is a way that the creek could always have some water in it. But the issue is what, with the floodgate, is how to prevent the high tide from coming back in. And as I say, we've collected some information on new technology. It looks really expensive, and one of the questions is, whose problem is it? Because it's right under Brookhaven. The creek is in Port Jefferson, and so there's a lot of negotiation about how to solve that problem jurisdictionally, I think.
We're just about at time. Does anyone else have a burning question or comment? Okay, you could always write in the survey. Again, you know, this is overwhelming information. I'm not alone in that, I don't think, right? Getting some nods here. And this is a problem, again, it's going to take the whole community to solve. Like we're talking about, there are these larger infrastructural projects, which the Port Jefferson Village government, sometimes in tandem with the Brookhaven government, sometimes in tandem because it's a New York State road that's running 25A over the tide gate. It's this multi-layer intermunicipal issue, and of course the county, you know, as well. So, you know, myself, other board members, the mayor have been working to build relationships so that these conversations are easier. They've started, and so now it's just getting everybody in the virtual or physical room, you know, sooner than later, and consistently, and planning for what's going to help not just Port Jefferson Village, but, you know, Brookhaven's got a stake in this, New York State, the county. And again, circling back, absolutely in the short term, you know, what can we do? I think the best way to combat fear is action, you know, and feeling like you can help with something. You know, there's our Conservation Advisory Council, civic groups, local environmental groups are working to help with different kinds of manuals and instruction on how to collect the water, stormwater on your own property. You know, how to have a little rain garden or do a little berm, or just start by planting a tree. You know, I feel like I've become known as the tree lady in the village, and I'm totally okay with that. But you know, by returning what used to be here in as much of a capacity as possible, if each of us do a tiny bit, those tiny bits add up to a whole lot. And so, you know, we will be working, again, in that short-term capacity to get this information out to our residents, to empower. I know I've asked Elizabeth if maybe, you know, Sea Grant and other organizations can look at maybe putting together either a manual or webinar for residents. You know, they put together wonderful things for governments and nonprofits, but as all you are wondering, what can we do on our own properties to help with this issue, and that would be a really powerful piece of information. So we will work on getting that out to you. One of the questions on the survey is how can we best follow up and keep you in the loop about this information, so you can let us know your top 3 choices there. And otherwise, again, any questions, comments, you might wait until tomorrow to take the survey, because sometimes you're in the morning brushing your teeth and you say, oh, I didn't ask that. So please, you know, those at home, those here in the room, do sometime in the next 30 days take that survey. If you go on the Port Jefferson Village official YouTube page, you can review this video, and it will have a link to the survey. In the Port e-report that's coming out this week, it will have both, you know, the links to the survey and this video. Again, I can't thank enough for the wonderful presentation. It took months and months. If we could just get another round of applause for these folks here. And do you want to?
Yeah, just
come on.
we want to thank you all for coming. This is an important part of the whole process to get feedback, and we'll be back with hopefully a whole bunch of interesting ideas and trying to see if they're going to work or not. But we also, I think, want to thank Rebecca, who's shepherding us through New York State. Our monthly meetings. She doesn't know it, but in the office we call her the leader of the PAC. Oh, no. And the PAC committee also that's here, because it's wonderful that we have periodic meetings and we get various feedbacks.
Thank you, Michael. And again, I by no means work alone. Our PAC committee, these fine folks here. It's been a lot to get this together, and it's just the tip of I'll say it, the tip of the iceberg, even if it's melting. And we're continuing to get this going. And even though like the Huntington timeline seems eternal, in the our village has only been incorporated for a handful of decades, relatively. It's not in the timeline. If something takes 10 years, it's something that needs to be done and aims to serve for the next 100+ years. As far as the worst case scenarios go, I think in general in life we plan for sort of the worst case scenario we're willing to think about, I think. But in so many capacities of our lives, we still plan, even if we don't know if what we're planning and the actions we're taking are going to be effective. We still do it because we're human, and we prepare. Nobody knows what the decades are going to bring. There's still people out there who say, this is nonsense and it's not happening. It is happening. We see the national graphs that are and predictions that are showing it. It's a question of, as a community, again, what are we prioritizing as we see this coming in? How are we going to take action? No, we're never, and I'll say it a million times, and I feel like the Grim Reaper, we're never going to stop flooding. And I think that as a baseline is really important to understand. Continuing to see flooding, no matter what happens in the next couple of decades of flood mitigation efforts, we were drowned meadow. We were a marshland. We regularly flooded. And that's the way that the glacial erratic deposited all of our, boulders and sand and everything. This is what we were meant to do. And then people hundreds of years ago started filling it in, made a little causeway to have their horse and carriage through. And then little by little, it kept getting filled in. And so this is what we're looking at. We can't go back in time. We can't say, please don't do that. And if they didn't, we wouldn't have our beautiful village. So we're looking at the facts. We're looking at, where we are now, what we know, and how we can put one foot in front of the other and move forward most effectively. And again, you being here tonight, you tuning in, all of the board being here, this is how it gets done. And I have full confidence that, in my lifetime in the village, we're going to see great, wonderful changes, in flood mitigation, and hopefully it brings the community together as well. So thank you all for being here. Please reach out anytime with any questions. Please, please, please fill out that survey, and have a lovely night and stay dry out there.